This afternoon, we're going to be having presentations on both disability issues and on issues related to privacy, particularly those that come out of Ferpa, the federal law regarding privacy in the educational environment. Our two presenters are Latasha Berlucci, who is our local Alexandria campus disabilities advisor, and Beth Harper, who is the executive vice president for student services for the college. Latasha will present first, and then Beth will present after that.
As I was introduced, my name is Latasha Berlucci. I'm the disability counselor. I've been here about 2 years. And today I was asked to speak a little bit about accommodations. And so I'm just kind of going to generally take you through some overview of what accommodations are, who qualifies for accommodations, the process. And then I've also provided you with some detailed handouts. If you have any questions, I don't want you to hesitate to contact me. The best way to contact me is via email. It is on the handouts. But I'll go ahead and get started then. So today we're going to talk about accommodations. What do I do with this MOA, which is your Memorandum of Accommodations? I want to let you know that NOVA is committed to serving students with documented disabilities. Under the 504 Rehabilitation Act of 1973 and the Disabilities Act, which is ADA, disability services are available for all currently enrolled students who have a documented disability. And the documented disability should have, the student will have substantial limits on one or more life majors activity, of course in this situation, primarily learning, and who are otherwise qualified. So what does this mean to you? By law, we are required to provide these services to students that are eligible. So who is eligible? As mentioned earlier, is those that have a documented chronic disability that substantially limits one or more major life activities and who are otherwise academically qualified. So who is eligible? Usually individuals with visual, hearing, or speech impairment, impaired mobility, ADHD, ADD, learning disabilities, developmental reading disorders, dyslexia, cerebral palsy, autism spectrum disorders, TBI, which is traumatic brain injury, medical concerns, and psychological and psychiatric disorders. These are just getting started. Pretty much, I want to walk you through the process on what students have to do in order to meet, to be accommodated here at the college. First and foremost, students have to complete a disability intake packet, and then they have to provide to me the appropriate disability-related documentation. Once they have those documentations and the disability intake pack completed, I will contact them, and I will work with them to kind of do an interview with them. Once we're in our interview process, it's during that meeting that we actually write up and develop their Memorandum of Accommodation, which we call for short an MOA. Students can actually access the intake packet at our front desk in Student Services, which is room 194, or they can access it from our website. So just in theory, there's a little timeline on what kind of transpires when a student comes in to seek accommodations or services. Pretty much the student gathers the information. I evaluate the information and the documentation as provided. We write up any accommodations that we feel appropriate based off that documentation. The MOA is then provided to the student, which then needs to present it to you in class. And then after that, you will meet with the student to kind of go over the logistics of those accommodations. So what is the 411 on accommodations? More or less, accommodations are provided to students who must be qualified. They do not alter the fundamentals of the class. They're reasonable, and they should not place an undue burden on the institution. So that we have many different types of accommodations that we offer here at NOVA, usually in 3 different categories. Some are the classroom, testing, and other accommodations. So examples of testing, or excuse me, classroom accommodations are accessing the professor's handouts, slides, PowerPoints, things of that nature, anything that's presented on overheads in class. A lot of times they're able to have additional time to complete in-class writing assignments or in-class assignments that are timed. They're able to have a note taker. Most of the time it's a volunteer note taker. Some you may see use smart pens. I don't know if anybody's familiar with smart pens or seen students use them. They actually record the lecture while they're taking notes, and then they can upload it on the computer. There are times that students, we may ask for modifications in regards to your attendance policy. Someone may have mobility related disabilities that may take them a little bit longer to get to class, and or sometimes they have maybe medical conditions that may mean that they're hospitalized at certain points when their symptoms have been exacerbated, things of that nature. So we may ask that you work with them in those instances. We ask that you allow them to record your lectures. Once again, we use the LiveScribe pen. Students sometimes use their iPhone, iPads, computers, apps, whatever they have access to, personal recording devices to record lectures. And a lot of them as well, if you see it on their accommodation sheet, they're allowed to use their iPad, a laptop, or anything to kind of take notes in class. For testing accommodation, the most common one is additional time to complete their testing quizzes. And we also ask that usually when they have additional time to complete their testing quizzes, that a lot of times they test in the testing center. Okay. And then of course we have assistive technology and devices that they can use. If they're testing in a testing center, we actually have an area in the testing center that is set up and designed just for our students who are accommodated. And so there's assistive devices, technology downloaded on the computers that they use that will assist them. Once in a while, you may have a student that needs a human reader or scribe. Most of our readers or scribes that are assigned for someone who, our human reader or scribes are usually assigned to someone who has maybe low vision or some type of vision impairment and or maybe mobility related disability. Otherwise, we usually have assistive technology like Read and Write Gold that actually can read your test to them. Other types of accommodations that we offer are materials in alternate formats, sometimes electronic format, a larger print. You may see that some may request for larger print font size. We also offer additional tutoring time in the use of the resource center, and then any auxiliary aids. Sometimes some students might have FM listening devices and other devices that assist them in the classroom. I don't know if you're familiar with that. I thought I'd give you a sample of what possibly an MOA would look like. And so I also did put this in the handout, so if you see it, you can identify that this is an actual memorandum of conversation that a student will present to you. And we're going to cover information about this. So typically, once a student is accommodated and the memorandum of accommodation is written, they have some responsibilities. And the things that I'm going to cover with you today are things that they are aware of, and I do go over that in our interview process. One is the students' responsibilities in regards to their classroom accommodations. They should provide you with their MOA as soon as possible. Now, I just had a professor call me today and say that they just received an MOA despite the class started, it was a 16-week class, and I told them that despite the student just providing you the MOA now, you still have to accommodate them from this point forward. However, and we'll talk about that more, MOAs are not retroactive. So if they did not provide it to you at the beginning of the semester, you're not held accountable to accommodate them. Of course, since the start of the semester, you're held accountable to accommodate them once it is in your hands. Okay? It's their responsibility to make sure that their MOA is valid. Each semester, a student has to renew their MOA. Okay? So if their MOA will have a date and the semester that is valid for, at least for my campus. Okay? And what will have to happen is if you see a student present to you a spring MOA and it's the fall and it was the spring of last semester, you do not have to accommodate them based off that. You can suggest to them to meet with their disability counselor to make sure that it's renewed. Okay? And then of course, once again, they should, once they have the accommodations in place, meet with you to coordinate the logistics. When am I going to take my test? I may have to take my test at a different time than the rest of the class because I get extended time, and I may have a class right after that intervenes with my extended times, or interferes with my extended time, so I may need to schedule a later date or time. Okay? Professors' responsibilities when it comes to classroom accommodations. Please do not provide any accommodations unless you receive a current MOA. Okay? Provide only the approved accommodations. Sometimes I have professors that are very caring and just sometimes over accommodate, and I always suggest do not provide any accommodations unless they're approved. And then once again, you should always schedule a meeting. If a student doesn't necessarily initiate the conversation with you to have a meeting once they give you their MOA, I encourage you to initiate that conversation with them. And then as for note takers, students are really, a lot of times on our MOA will say an in-class volunteer student note taker. And sometimes we ask that professors help kind of work out the logistics of that with the student. Sometimes students may need help to identify another student in the classroom who's willing to take notes for them. We do have carbon copy paper that if they take notes, then it's not more work on the student. They can just kind of rip off the bottom piece and give it to the student. Otherwise, there might be a student that's been identified who's willing to voluntarily take notes, and they may type up their notes and email it to the student. So we ask that this professors kind of get involved and help work out the logistics with the student if needed. And sometimes if you've asked for somebody to volunteer and nobody's kind of willing to do that, please contact me and I can always give some suggestions, or at least I'm made aware of that there's nobody available for the student. So students, in regards to testing center, the testing center doesn't necessarily have a quiet booth, and I do explain this to our students, but they have cubicles that are available that, once again, are equipped with all the assistive technology and devices that's needed for them. It's their responsibility, once they've coordinated the logistics with you on when the test will be scheduled, that they're going to make sure that they reserve that quiet spot in the testing center. That's their responsibility, okay? Let's see. And then once again, usually when they reserve that quiet spot, the assistive technologies should be in place, and then it's their responsibility just to double check with the point of contact in the testing center to make sure that they have the assistive technology available to them when they need it. An example of that would be like Read and Write Gold, which is a software that's a text-to-speech software which will read the test to them out loud. They may need from you, and this is something that they would have talked with you about prior to the test date, is that they may need a test, maybe if they're using assistive technology like Read and Write Gold, they may need it in a Word document. The test to be in a Word document. Let's see. And then it's the student's responsibility to coordinate the reader-scribe services with me. So if a student needs a human reader or scribe, it is their responsibility, once again, to coordinate that service with me. I ask that they know 14 days in advance because I have to secure a reader or scribe. So that's why we strongly encourage the students to work with you in advance to know those dates when they will be taking their tests, so that I can then secure the reader scribe for those upcoming test exams and quizzes. Okay, so a professor's responsibility when it comes to the testing center is that it's your responsibility to drop off the test in advance and then pick it up, okay? Sometimes I've had where students are struggling to contact their professor in advance to get the test in the testing center, and students get a little overwhelmed and the test isn't available to them when they thought it would be. So that I just ask that you really work with students to make sure that you coordinate your dates and times when those exams are going to be offered to them, so that you can provide the test in the testing center at that given day and time. Preferably, if you can drop it off 24 hours in advance, it's even better. It's your responsibility to pick up the test when the test is completed, and once the rest of the class has provided their grades, the student who's been accommodated in the testing center should also receive their grades at the same time. In addition to that, I try to inform professors that whatever is granted in the classroom to students, say it's an open book exam or whatever you provide to them in a classroom, just because the students testing in the testing center, they should have the same rights as the students that are testing in the classroom, okay? You don't have to worry about assistive technology, that should already be in place. However, your responsibility would be is making sure the test will work with the assistive technology. And on the MOA, it may say that you need to change the format of the test to electronic format or PDF or Word document so that it will work with the assistive technology. You may be asked at times to record the test questions. Tape record it and have those questions available for the students. And that's only if, say, the assistive technology for some reason isn't compatible or something didn't work out and I couldn't secure reader scribe, we may ask that of you. And that will be indicated on the MOA if needed. I don't use that one as often though.
Who provides the MOA to the test center?
It's just a great question. It is the student's responsibility. So what happens is when I develop the MOA with a student, it's the student's responsibility to give it to their professors, the testing center, and the learning center if they're going to be receiving additional tutoring hours.
Okay. Because often I've gone to the testing center and they don't have anything, so I make copies. Right?
Oh, that was wonderful thought from you. If that ever happens, the testing center directly a lot of times contacts me as well. If need be, I send it to them. But it is the student's responsibilities. And once again, in our interview process, I do give them a handout that states their responsibilities and your responsibilities. So I appreciate you working with that situation. Okay, so when it comes to a few more of the responsibilities of the professors, any questions that you have about an accommodation, please contact me directly. Okay, if there's something you didn't understand, emails, great, phone calls are fine. I've had professors stop down in my office if I'm available and meet with me. I have no problem with clarifying anything. In addition to that, if a student writes you, sends you an email in regards to the disability in any way, or questions about accommodations or what have you, please respond in writing. And then make sure if you are emailing them, please do not hesitate to copy me on the email, and then I'll be more than willing to intervene or help clarify any questions or address anything or just be made aware of what's going on. The common mistakes that I see that happens, sometimes there's a refusal to provide certain accommodations, and I remind professors, remember our first slide? We have to, it's law, okay? Some of the other common mistakes would be that sometimes individuals will question the student's disability. It's not our place to question it. If the student has the MOA, trust and believe they had to provide sufficient documentation to prove that disability. Okay? And then some of them have asked about specific diagnosis. I've had professors call me even today to ask, may I ask what that student's diagnosis? No, I may not share that information. Nor is it relevant. If you're asking a question about the accommodation, I can answer that. If you need a question about how to manage a certain behavior or something in classroom, I can assist with that, but I cannot disclose that type of information. Sometimes professors provide inaccurate accommodations because maybe, once again, they've granted accommodations that were not on the MOA, or they didn't understand the accommodation that was on the MOA. If that ever happens, please do not hesitate just to email me. I'll be, like I said, more than happy to clarify. Sometimes I see this happen is disclosure of the student's disability in class. Sometimes students disclose. Let me make that clear. They openly disclose. But sometimes professors may make an announcement in front of the class about students that are in their class that are receiving accommodations. It's inappropriate to do. Requests to see the student's disability documentation. Some have asked, can I have a copy of the documentation that you submitted to the disability counselor? We cannot ask those types of questions of our students or request for those type of documentations to be provided. Here's just a few tips that I put together. Treat all your students the same regardless of the disability. Be proactive. Once again, if a student hands you an accommodation sheet and they haven't scheduled an appointment with you to kind of discuss that, and you have questions about it and you want to see how does this work for this particular student, please reach out to them, reach out to me, do whatever needs to be done so I can assist you. And consider universal accessibility when designing your course. I did give you guys some handouts about some principles of universal design workshop that's coming up. I encourage you guys to take advantage of that. Be approachable and encourage students to register with us and talk about their accommodation needs. So if a student does openly disclose that they have had a learning disability or if they had an IEP in high school, it's okay to say, do you realize that we have services here? If you want information on the counselor here that's available, I can give you her name and email, and you can meet with her. Maybe she can assist you with maybe having some accommodations here while you're at NOVA. Give students the opportunity to lead the discussion, so when they're sitting down with you and they want to discuss your MOA, give them the opportunity to kind of talk to you about their needs, okay? And if you feel that students need additional accommodations, please just give me a call. You're in the classroom, you may see something that I'm not made aware of, and we can probably address that. And always be clear about your classroom as per your classifications. Okay, classroom management is a major part. And I just ask that if you need help you want me to intervene or want to brainstorm some suggestions and ideas on how to manage a particular behavior with a particular student in classroom, please don't hesitate to email me. Now, if the behavior, of course, is very concerning maybe it seems like the student said a threat to themselves or somebody else, of course, I'm going to always ask you to call 911 or campus police and/or go ahead and put in a no voice care report. You don't have to wait to speak to me on really concerning behaviors, okay? Just keep in mind that MOAs are not a get out of jail free card. Some professors may think that the students with accommodations have an advantage than other students, and that's not necessarily so. They're accommodated because they need them. It's about us granting access for them while they're here on campus, and they need those accommodations. Document any concerns you have regarding the student, regarding anything you see in class, and keep in mind, as I mentioned before, I cannot identify a disability, however, I can discuss the things not to do. We kind of already talked about this a little bit. Don't over-accommodate. Try not to tease out why one thing works and another thing doesn't. I'll be more than willing to work with you on certain things. And try not to identify the student's disability. I've had plenty of people kind of throw out some suggestions on what they thought was going on with the student. It doesn't really get us anywhere. I'd rather focus on what could we do to help the student be successful in class. I'm hoping that everybody has the disability statement in their syllabus. If not, hopefully it's included. We have our website link down there. If you haven't gone to our website, I encourage you to do so. There's some great resources for you guys available on our website. I covered this, it's in the handout as well. It's just appropriate language and demeanor. Just making sure that we use the appropriate language when communicating with our students with disabilities. Just making sure that we're always mindful that we treat all of our students with respect and treat them no differently than you would treat any of your other students. Because students do often report feeling disrespected or talked down to in some way. Once again, it's just, I've given you some information on etiquette and how to approach students and some of the language to use. Of course, when you see a student struggling, just make sure you contact me if you have some questions about their ability to, if they're having struggles and they need some more support in regards to their study skills or other difficulties. You can always send them to counseling. Counseling can always refer them to me. Or once again, if they've opened up and disclosed that they have a documented disability, then you can refer them directly to me. Here's some questions, some frequently asked questions. I do have them on your list, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to review them. The document I gave you, the handouts are pretty detailed. Just let you know that the Counseling Center, we do offer short-term counseling, referrals to the community and resources. So I am a part of the Counseling Center, so if you send students there, we can always assist them that way. I wanted to make sure I kind of let you, I don't know if everybody's aware of our Nova Care reporting system. Okay, so to definitely report any concerning behaviors that you're seeing in the classroom. If you have an event or something going on, please always want to put in your disclaimer for students that may need accommodations. You can always contact me if you need something, and I can always direct you to who may be able to assist. So if you're having an event and you may need an interpreter, I know who to put you in contact with. One thing that I love that we added to our our webpage, is the NOVA's definition of accommodations. So when students bring you their MOA, if you go on our webpage under faculty resources. Yes, faculty resources. There's NOVA's definitions of accommodations. And when you open up that, it will give you definitions and examples of the most commonly used accommodations, which I think are extremely helpful. I even take students to NOVA's definition of accommodations just in case they don't fully understand their own accommodations. So I encourage you, if you find time or if you come across a student who is accommodated, you can always go to this webpage or this PDF format. It's in a PDF. You can always print it out and save it, but it's a good guideline for you. There's some, we have policies on our service dogs and guide animals. I encourage you to look at that. And then, of course, I'm not sure if you're aware that we have a faculty handbook that's available for you on our webpage, and that's what teaching students with disabilities.
So you do not need an MOA if they have a service dog?
Correct. And there's only 2 questions you can ask, and it's on the paper. And it's also in our policy. It should be in our policy, the 2 questions.
Basically, the guidance, I think this is the best way to think about it. Having a service animal is just like having a wheelchair. You don't look at the student and say, do you really need that wheelchair? Or do I have to allow this wheelchair in my class?
Well, no, I had an issue where my student had a service dog and I didn't think anything about it. It's a beautiful dog. And then one day they approached me a week ago and a week and a half ago, and they were upset because one of the teachers said they couldn't bring the service dog to class and have an MOA. And so I didn't know, and he goes, and I'm not just, I have no learning disability. So it's difficult sometimes when they approach you to know what to say. So, but
You could
so I
always
could have
refer
said
them to Latasha
Yes.
or
I've
refer
had-
a faculty member to Latasha.
That's a perfect example because I just had a student come down with his service dog the other day and says,
Wow.
I was told I have to come here, and I explained to him, no, he did not. And, I kind of talked him down and explained the situation to him. He kind of regrouped and realized that it wasn't, he was less angry, I can say, when he left, and less offended, at least when he expressed to me, after I had a conversation with him about our policy and that, that some staff may not be aware of it, and that we are reaching out to them.
We've had that happen on a couple of cases. But you just have to think of a service animal like a wheelchair.
You mentioned that we can refer the student to you. Do we just call you, or do we ask the student to follow up with you?
You can always email me and let me know that you are sending a student down. You can always walk them down. Sometimes if you just send them, they may never get to me. So if you're really concerned about them, like I said, you can kind of give me a heads up. It may be somebody I already had, name has already come across my desk, or somebody I've already worked with in the past, and maybe they just haven't provided you with their MOA. It's a good idea to kind of just let me know. And then this way you or I can follow up with them, make sure that everything's okay and they've got everything they need. But please keep in mind, it's just a service. We can't force students to receive accommodations or seek them out. All we can do is make them aware of it in hopes that they will take advantage of that, because it will assist them in that.
The one question I want to come back to is the problem of disclosure, because a lot of times, and maybe it's because of my background, I see students who seem to have disability issues, and yet they've chosen not to disclose. What are the boundaries on me in terms of discussing what I'm seeing with them?
Well, I think if you're keeping it academically focused, I think that you can discuss your concerns about the academics, and sometimes in discussing that, sometimes they will admit, well, I did struggle in high school. And that is when I think that's an open door to say, oh, did you receive support in high school? And they say, yes, well, we have some supports in place for you here. You can go and speak with Ms. Berlush, and if you're interested in seeking those supports, you can here. But I think it depends on what you feel comfortable with. And I always look for the open door. If a student mentions something about high school or that they struggled in the past, ask them to tell me a little bit more about that. And then they may say, well, I did have an extended time and I did have this. I said, oh, so you were accommodated. Well, that's wonderful, because that's what NOVA provides as well. So if you can provide me with, it just opens the doorway up for the conversation. So I hope that helps.
No, it helps. It's a difficult one, because sometimes they have had support in the past. Sometimes it seems to be a problem, but it's still not diagnosed.
Absolutely. I've had more of my adult students are coming in. They struggled all through high school, never maybe been accommodated, and just learning now that they've been diagnosed with attention deficit or a learning disability, or maybe they've been in an accident and had a TBI, and then really are struggling with some memory and concentration things they've never struggled with in the past. And so now, how do I deal with this? You know, sometimes if they're made aware that there's supports in place, they're more open to come and seek out services. But pretty much if you're going over your syllabus in the beginning of the semester, if you want to remind them as you go through that there are services provided amongst the testing center and the learning center and everything else, that we do have disability support services available as much as possible, encouraging them to use all their supports here, and maybe that's another way to get them to come in and meet with me. And I've actually had other students bring down referrals from other students. They brought them hand in hand. Here, Ms. Berlucci, here's another student I found in my class that was struggling. And they were really open to that. And so I was very shocked. But it was a chain reaction. I've had one bring down a student, then that one brought down another student. Next thing you know, it's true.
Your office is full.
Which is a good thing, that they're seeking services. Yeah. And then, of course, whenever I do my introduction in classes and I go and maybe I'm covering a class or doing an introduction, I always tell them about the services I provide. And there's usually, in every class I do that, at least 2 students that come to me and disclose that they have had IEPs in high school.
Can you tell me what Ferpa stands for?
Family Educational Rights Privacy Act.
Very good. Have you heard me do this before?
No, I have done this in other places.
You may also occasionally hear Ferpa referred to as the Buckley Amendment. A lot of people are familiar with William F. Buckley, who was a conservative intellectual, very prolific writer and speaker, but he had a brother named James who was in the United States Senate. And Senator James Buckley was actually the one we don't hear as much about, but he's the one that we have to thank for Ferpa. Ferpa dates back to the early 1970s, 73 or 74. And over the years, Ferpa has sort of become regarded as this horrible big bugbear that doesn't let us talk to anybody about anything, and we can hide behind it, and we don't have to talk to parents, and just go away, it's Ferpa. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Ferpa gives gives college students the right to have access to their educational records. It doesn't let us keep secrets. And it lets them do 2 things. It lets them challenge those records if they believe that they're inaccurate. And it lets them have some control, but not total control, over the dissemination of information in their records. So what's an educational record? Any ideas?
Grades.
Educational record is any record that's directly related to the student and is maintained by the college. I'm going to give you a handout at the end, but I don't want you to sit here and read it while I'm talking. So, personally, the key is personally identifiable information. If that record can be traced to the student, and it's a record that's maintained by the college, then it falls under the FERPA umbrella of regulation. What could be personally identifiable information? Obviously the student's name, a social security number, family information that makes it very obvious who the student is, comments about the student that you could look at, and if you didn't know who it was about, you would know who it was about because you would be able to tell. So it's something they call PII is the shorthand that the lawyers use a lot. And it's maintained by the school. If it's maintained by NOVA, then it's in some kind of official repository. So it might be in the student information system at PeopleSoft. It might be in ImageNow. It might be in our Maxient concerning behavior database. But if it's traceable to the student and it's maintained by the school, then it's subject to FERPA. FERPA does not include your own personal notes, your own grade book that you're not sharing with other people, a conversation you have with a colleague. None of those are FERPA protected. Yeah.
We are sharing our grade books with the dean, though. What do you mean by that?
Are you talking about your Blackboard?
Yeah.
It's officially maintained by the college when it goes into the student information system. So FERPA, the best ruling that we've gotten is that it applies to the final course grades that are in PeopleSoft. At that point, it is maintained by the college. Blackboard's not maintained forever and indefinitely, but PeopleSoft is. When can we disclose without a student's consent? FERPA has a clause for something called directory information. Directory information includes things such as, there's a very long list in the law, and then colleges can kind of pick and choose from that list as to what they will define as their own directory information. It includes things like the student's name, whether the student is actually enrolled, full-time, part-time. It includes things like, a lot of it clearly was designed for press releases for colleges that do that. So it includes things like the height and weight of members of athletic teams. That's not a big one, although we're getting more into that area. So that is one thing. And there's a list. All of this information is in our student handbook if you want to look at the complete list. I'm just going to kind of hit the high points with you today. Information can be disclosed to any college official with a legitimate need for access. So who's a college official? Look to your left and look to your right. You're all college officials. Someone who's employed by the college, someone who is under contract to the college, someone who is doing research on behalf of the college. The definition of college official is a fairly loose one, but someone who has an official connection to the college and who has a legitimate need to have access to that information. Clearly, if it's in PeopleSoft, you all have access. FERPA makes a specific exception for disclosing information to the parents of a student under 21 who violates our drug or alcohol policy. Again, that is not as much of an issue at Nova as it is at a residential college with an active Greek system and things like that. It does come up occasionally. To another college which the student attends or seeks to attend. So if I get a call, as I did at one point, from the Dean of Students at GW, that says we have this student who's enrolled at Nova and enrolled at GW, and we have these concerns, let's talk. Absolutely. That's very clearly permissible under FERPA. You can write a letter of recommendation even if the student doesn't give you specific written permission because of this provision in FERPA. If the student poses a threat to self or others, and we'll talk a little more about that. And to the parents of a tax-dependent student of any age. And again, we'll come back to that in just a minute. So, threats to self. April 16th, 2007. Where were you that day? Do you know what happened that day?
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech. Subway Cho killed 32 of his fellow students and then turned his gun on himself. And a lot of things that followed Virginia Tech was, as things started to come out, was that people at Virginia Tech were afraid to talk to each other. They had seen a lot of things, various people had seen things that were of concern with this student, and they were afraid to talk to each other, and one of the things they cited was fear of violating FERPA. So FERPA, the FERPA gods, Congress and the Family Policy Compliance Office, issued a clarification at that point. And they said, if you think there's a health and safety emergency, if you think the student may pose a threat to self or a threat to others, you may talk to anybody you need to. And we're not going to second guess you. We're not going to come in a month after whatever it was and say, well, it turns out it really wasn't that much of an emergency. After all, you shouldn't have done it. So they would trust the college's judgment. This was huge. So I called students' parents. I had reported their student might be suicidal or various things like that. If we think there's a health and safety concern, we can talk to anybody we need to. Parents, medical professionals, other faculty, our police, whatever is necessary. Keeping students and our community safe is not something that FERPA gets in the way of legally. There are people still who don't understand this, and that's one of the reasons I really welcome the chance to talk to you. Threats to others, same thing. Now, if you think a student is posing an active threat, call 911. Don't even stop and consider, call 911, call the police, you know, if we're really, but if it may not be as imminent and you're concerned, still, you don't really know if it's an emergency or not. We're gonna look at a case in just a minute, and we'd like to err on the side of keeping our students safe. Everybody's favorite helicopter. This, I think, is where you're gonna run into Ferpa concerns as a faculty member, probably more than any other area. Ferpa has always allowed us to share information with the parents of tax-dependent students. Any of you have kids in college? And one question parents often ask is, well, why can't you send me my kid's grades? I'm paying the bill. Okay. Well, enough parents with those concerns got to the General Assembly. And in 2008, we have a Virginia law that requires us to communicate with the parents of tax-dependent students. Any student whose name is on the parent's federal income tax return as a dependent falls under this. How do we do it? What information can or should we share with the parents of tax-dependent students? Can you as an instructor share class attendance information during the semester with the parent via email if the parent requests this? Is class attendance a student's educational record? What do you think? Have you ever gotten that request? Hey, I really want to, I'm concerned because I don't think my kid's come into class. Was he in class last Tuesday?
But it's not an official record.
Yeah.
I don't think you
That's
could
not an
because it's not
education.
official.
Yeah.
It is not a part of the student's education. Whether or not the student is enrolled for the semester is a part of the record. That's in PeopleSoft. Whether he was in class last Tuesday? No. So you don't need to do that. So again, we can release enrollment information by semester or by term. Can you share assignment grades during the semester with the parent via email if the parent requests this? This is part of the educational record. How did you do on the test last week? I'm really concerned. He didn't seem to study a lot. And you know, he's had this problem since he was in like 8th grade. He just really doesn't want to focus on his schoolwork. So how's he doing? What are you going to do? No, you're not. Only final course grades are maintained in SIS. So what's the process? If you will look at it and they'll fill out a form, and Nikki will hold on to that, and then she'll print an unofficial transcript for the student. 9 times out of 10, it ends there. We're a college. We don't have teacher conferences. So you're not obligated to meet with these parents. Now, I wouldn't, notice I said you're not obligated, I didn't say you're not allowed. You all have good professional judgment. But I don't want you to feel that you are obligated to, you don't want parents pounding on you. We want to try to have them understand that their students are adults, they are in college, they need to talk to their student, and the student can talk to you about concerns. We often see this most often with the parents of students with disabilities, and it makes sense that we would see it there. These are parents who, since the child was 4, 5, maybe 6 years old, have been required by law to be part of the discussions of their child's education. They've had to go to IEP conferences and sign off on the IEPs. They're used to having these progress reports from teachers and teacher conferences and stuff like that, and they get to college and we go, wait a minute, nope, we're not gonna do that. So we have to be gentle with these parents sometimes and help them understand that we have a common goal. And our common goal is that their student will be an independent, functioning adult. We need to work together on this, and part of that is helping the student learn to advocate for themselves, to talk to us on their own. We have a general college practice protocol that we don't talk to parents without the student being part of the conversation. So if you have a student walk in with a parent and they want to talk to you, that's fine. By the student being there, the student is implicitly giving you permission to share with the parent. If the parent appears alone, send them to Nikki, to your campus registrar, and she will share the appropriate level of information with them. What about dual enrollment students? Dual enrollment students are students who are concurrently enrolled in their high school and at Nova. They have not graduated yet. If you haven't had dual enrollment students in your class, I'm sure you will. You may well have had them and you don't know about it. We have two kinds of dual enrollment students. We have students who are in what's called contract classes that actually take place in their high school. So unless you have been asked to teach one of those classes, you would not necessarily see those students. We also have dual enrollment students who individually come to campus to take classes. You may have had those students in your class and you didn't know it because they would appear just like any other student. There would be nothing to distinguish them. But most of them are under 18 and therefore they're minors. FERPA is very clear on this. When they're in college, they're in college, even if they're still in high school. So for FERPA purposes, they are treated just like any other college student. When they have control over their educational records at Nova. Their parents still have control over their high school records. So sort of have one foot in each camp. But as far as you're concerned, well, the student is a minor or the student is still in high school, that's irrelevant for you in terms of what you can do. There's a little thing here. We can share, particularly if they're in contract classes, we can share information with the high school under the terms of the contract and then they can talk to the parents. But again, if you're having those individual students coming to campus, this is probably not going to be a factor. So just to know, you don't need to treat those students anyway. So I've got some questions for you. FERPA applies to all information about our students, true or false?
False.
False. Yeah. And I'm sorry, this is red on bright blue. Oh well. FERPA makes it virtually impossible to disclose anything to anyone, even colleagues.
False.
That's false. Yeah. It's okay to disclose information about a student to a school she plans to transfer to.
True.
Yes, remember we have that exclusion specifically for schools that the student attends where it seeks to attend. So they don't even have to attend. The consequences of violating FERPA are devastating, so the safest course is to disclose nothing.
False.
That is false. Let me tell you about the consequences of FERPA. The ultimate consequence is that a school will lose the ability to award federal financial aid. We've had FERPA since the early 1970s. How many times do you think that's ever been done? Never. Never, never, never. Zero. Okay, so basically that doesn't happen. Here's what happens. First of all, nobody can be sued under FERPA. FERPA specifically does not allow lawsuits. The most that a student could do is complain to the Department of Education, to the Family Policy Compliance Office, which is the office that rules FERPA. And FECO will look at the complaint and to see if it merits any further investigation. If they investigate and they come and they find that there's a consistent pattern of disregard of FERPA, not one person messed up one time, but a consistent pattern at the college of disregard of FERPA, they will write us what's called a Dear Colleague letter. And that letter is public, and that letter says, don't do it anymore, get your act together. So, you know, if you make a mistake in FERPA, the sky's not going to fall on you. You're not going to be fired from your job or anything like that. It's all this rumor stuff going around about FERPA. Students in my dual enrollment class aren't 18, so it's okay for me to talk to their parents about their grades.
False. Oh,
Totally false.
false, yeah.
So here's some examples. I'll let you read this. I hate to be somebody reading in PowerPoint.
Could you go back to the last question, please?
Mm-hmm. About dual enrollment? When we say my dual enrollment class, that's sort of the assumption that you're teaching in the high school.
Does age play any role?
Absolutely not.
In
If it's a college class, it falls under college rule.
21 or 18 or nothing?
Doesn't matter, they could be 12. If they're in a college, and we've had individual students who are 12, 13, 14 come to campus and take classes. It doesn't matter. If it's a college class, they own their college records. And again, FERPA is very, very clear on this. So, poor David Cathy.
From your phone number.
That does happen. Yeah, David, Kathy, you need to go talk to Beth. Yeah. How would you approach that?
Well, there really is only one issue, and that is whether he's currently enrolled or not.
Okay.
I guess them to the campus registrar, just to verify.
Yeah, you could do that. But again, you got these folks on the phone in Florida, so what could you do? Directory information just tells us whether or not he's currently enrolled.
Yeah.
So, you could say, well, you wouldn't say he'd been dismissed, but you could say, you know, well, according to, I'm looking, I don't see that he's currently enrolled.
Right.
He's not here.
The state does.
At this point, stuff is probably gonna come pouring at it from David K. What do you mean he's not there? Been sending him all this money. So you can find out what they're doing and then kind of build from it. If you think it's appropriate, you can let them know that they can contact the registrar and get a copy of grades or whatever. You know, final course grades, not grades in individual assignments. So, but again, and you know, if you feel that you need to send them to my office, you wouldn't be the first ones. Potentially suicidal. This is something that we see more often than we'd like it, which means one is more often than we'd like.
Submit a Nova Cares report.
Well,
Let
that
the
would certainly
police
be,
know.
that would certainly be one thing. Yes, that would be a very, very good thing to do. What are you gonna do about this?
Call 911.
Well, you might, depending upon what you're seeing and what he's saying to you. Please don't ever promise a student total confidentiality. People do it from the very best of motives. In fact, most students are satisfied if you say something to them like, I can promise you I won't tell anyone who doesn't need to know. But we want to keep you safe. And so let's talk about, you know, we can let you talk to a counselor. You know, if the student is saying something to indicate that, you know, the gun's in my backpack and it's loaded, and when I walk out of here, you're going to hear it go off, then you call 911. And you don't hesitate. And we're going to err on the side of keeping our students safe. But those promises of total confidentiality can come back to haunt you, and it's not appropriate. And when faculty promise confidentiality, they do it out of the best of motives, because they want the student to talk to them, they want to be a trusted helper to the student, they want the student to feel comfortable. But you can qualify it, and generally students are okay with that. What I will not tell anyone that doesn't need to know, but we need to keep you safe. And remember, at this point, Ferpa allows you to communicate with anybody. Is it an emergency? You don't know. You may not know. So don't hesitate to do what you need to do. Tell someone. The dean of students, the coordinator of counseling, file a concerning behavior report with Nova Cares, or if you think it's necessary, call 911. Our police, who would be the ones that would respond to that 911 call, are college police. And they're not going to come and drag the student away in handcuffs unless the student is physically out of control. But they are very good at doing a quick assessment, taking the student to an emergency room or to Woodburn Mental Health Center or anything like that, to the CSB, helping to arrange for an emergency assessment. And we have all kinds of supports that can kick in to help the student stay in school or withdraw or do whatever is appropriate for that student. What you don't want to do is say it's okay, I won't tell you. Because if that student is dead tomorrow, how are you going to feel if you didn't tell anybody? Posted grades, John faculty, we all know John. He won't use Blackboard. I don't know how old you all are, but I
Yeah,
see
that's
a
pretty
few,
good. Very
gray
common.
hairs in the room besides mine. You remember those lists of grades being posted in places? No, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But if somebody really doesn't want to do that, is there a way to approach this?
Can't use student names. So
No,
they
you
have to
sure
use
can't
a
use
unique
student names.
identifier that
Give
is not
them
their social
pet names.
security.
Right. You can post them, but they can't be personally identifiable to anybody other than themselves. So you don't want to use their name, you don't want to use certainly don't want to use their social security number, probably don't want to use their student ID number. And you don't want to post it, whatever, so, make up some code at the beginning of the semester if this is your chosen way of getting grades in there. So that every student has a unique identifier that's not connected to anything else. And then don't post them in alphabetical order.
Here we go.
Okay. This one's can be a little tricky. This sort of pulls you out of your faculty role for a minute, but just think about this a little bit, because you won't be in this position. But I will. Okay, here's how it works. This Virginia law in 2008 allows access by both parents, even if the parents are divorced, even if only one parent has had custody of the student. And it's the same rule with the tax return. However, as long as there's no specified judicial exclusion in the divorce agreement or other no contact order or something like that. Now, they're divorced. The divorce was so acrimonious that neither the son nor the mother will talk to the dad about his college career. How likely is she to give us a copy of the tax return showing him as a dependent? Just kind of guessing that's probably not going to happen. So we as a college, not you as a faculty member, we as a college will have to think about what else we might accept to show that, in fact, the parents were once married. We could ask the dad for a copy of the divorce decree or something like that. But we'll deal with it. But just to know that divorce is not a barrier to this. The other thing that we want to remember about this 2008 exclusion that says we have to talk to the parents, it only applies to parents or court-appointed legal guardians. It doesn't apply to spouses. They have no access. Brothers, sisters, grandparents, aunts, uncles, doesn't apply to any of those people. It's only parents or court-appointed legal guardians. Our students are, for the most part, over 18. It is unlikely that they would have a legal guardian, but at this point, but they may have had one who still may have the right to continue to claim the student on their taxes. So we would sort that out. But we've had a lot of cases where a spouse would show up and ask for this information because I'm paying the bills or whatever. They have no rights under Ferpa to get access to any information about the student. So, another thing that I want to be sure that I stress, and then we'll just do any questions you have. FERPA's not the only law that governs release of information. We can be asked for information about a student under FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. Obviously, we are asked all the time for information to meet certain federal regulations, such as financial aid regulations, veterans reporting, all that kind of stuff, and we do it. Information about a student can be subpoenaed. There are provisions of the Patriot Act that give Homeland Security the right to ask for information. None of those are things that you need to sort out. But if you ever have somebody, for example, show up at your office door who's doing a background investigation on a student, we see lots of those in this area because we're a company town and the government requires a lot of BIs. Send them to the registrar, and the registrars will deal with them. But just know that FERPA is not the other thing, the only way it can be released. And if we have a subpoena, which is always vetted by legal affairs, or we have a FOIA request, which again is going to go to legal affairs, just know that it may be very far-reaching. And so I'm saying this to say, be careful what you write in emails. They're not disclosable under FERPA, but if we get a subpoena or a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights or something like that, somebody might, don't assume that it's totally private unless it's locked in your desk drawer, in your own file folder that you don't share with anybody else. So be circumspect. Don't let that, now there's no record of a conversation. Talk to your colleagues if you need to. But be careful what you put in writing. Because just because it's not FERPA protected doesn't mean that it can't ever be accessed by anybody. Chances that it will be are slim and none. The other thing that falls under a different set of protections, as Latasha mentioned, is disability records. and they are protected under the ADA, the ADAAA, which is the Americans with Disabilities Amendments Act. Help me with all my A's here, Latasha. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, so the confidentiality of those records. So as a college official, you do not have a right to a student's disability records, because there's this other law that covers those, which is why Latasha made the point that she can't talk to you specifically about the student's disability, but she can talk to you about what you need to do for the accommodation. And finally, FERPA allows students to challenge anything in their educational records if they believe it's incorrect. And if they challenge it, we as a college must give them a hearing and listen to what their concerns are. And if we decide that they're right and there is something in their records that shouldn't be there, we would have to correct it. If we decide that what's in the record stands, then they have the right to put a statement in the record saying, well, I don't agree with this because blah, blah, blah. So that's the second right under FERPA. Have some control over the distribution of information and the right to challenge. Just because they challenge doesn't mean the college has to agree with them or alter the record. We do have to let them put a statement in if we decide that the record's there's a very our new student handbook should go live any day now. I thought it was live, but somebody said this morning it wasn't. We have an online student handbook, so take all those print copies that are floating around and throw them away. The student handbook is on the web. It is all electronic. There's extensive discussion of FERPA there. There's also a very good website that's maintained by the Family Policy Compliance Office, and I've given you in the handout the URL for that information. I'm always available to answer questions. Your deans of students are pretty conversant with FERPA, and of course we have a legal affairs staff. So what questions do you have now? Yes?
I think we have covered this, but probably I missed it. I have students, sometimes they come to me and say, I took this course before and I got a B. I'm repeating this to get an A to improve my GPA. Does FERPA allow me to verify that?
Sure.
And
yeah,
like registrar office and
well, just go in PeopleSoft. You can see their grade.
Oh, I can see.
Yeah, you can see the grade in PeopleSoft. Sure. You might caution them that if they get a C this time, it's not going to help their GPA, because when the course repeats, the last grade is the one that's counted in the GPA, not the highest grade.
Okay.
The other thing that students who are repeating may need to be cautioned about is that a lot of the four-year schools will go back and recompute the GPA to include all grades if they were repeating. So it's, yes, we'd like them to try to raise their grades and to repeat. I'm not arguing against repeats, but it is something that students may want to be a little bit cautious about. Raising a B to an A, yeah, raising an F to an A.
They say that, but
raising an F to an A, that's a different story, or a D to an A. But a B to an A, they should be careful. I would just say that, they should be careful.
Marginal.
Okay, other questions?
I have, it's not a serious issue as we were discussing at the beginning. Recently, a student's mother emailed me, and she asked me, she said, my son cannot access this is about accessing the lunch card. And he's having difficulty, blah, blah. But the email, her email and her son's email were at the same time. So I opened both of them, and he has the same problem. He said, I'm having difficulty, and the mother also said the same thing. So I emailed him back, and I emailed him back, and I said, this is how you can do it.
Yeah.
If you don't get successful with this, we'll talk tomorrow in person, and I will help you how to figure out. And I didn't email back to the mother.
That's
and
okay.
I was, I was amazed. I mean, it's not in, what is her involvement?
What you did was just fine. It would not be wrong to email the mother and say, I'll be happy to discuss this issue with your student.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was gonna do that.
So either one of those is fine. What you don't want to do is go and get involved in this huge conversation with the mother.
Because I wasn't sure, sometimes you're not sure whether
Oh, and
the
we have
student
parents,
knows,
we have
and-
parents who basically force their students to give them their log-on information, we do what we can. We do what we can. If it's coming from the student's VCCS email address, and you really, anything that has personally identifiable or sensitive stuff should be done within our email system, because it's protected. So, you know, when they write you from toosexyforwords@yahoo.com. You think I made that up, don't you? I did not make that up. Cross my heart and hope to die, I did not make it up. It's entirely appropriate to say we need to communicate through your VCCS email address. Because if they're emailing you, they're probably asking stuff that you'd like to be sure is going to them.
Yeah.
You don't know who is toosexyforwords@yahoo.com. Could be anybody. Could be the girlfriend or boyfriend. Who knows? Yeah.
About the email,
Yeah.
some educational institutions, they prohibit instructors to respond to personal email. What's our policy?
Nova would like for you to use the official email.
Yeah, I want to do that, but
Yes.
sometimes they have like
Well, write them
DC
back.
Hitman at .com and.
You can write them back at DC Hitman, and you can say, I have read, please check your Nova email, I've responded to that account. Because again, you have no idea who's on the other end of that email. You have no idea who's on the other end of the phone sometimes. But, you know, when I get a phone call asking for anything that might be sensitive, I put them through a verification. Okay, could you just, I'll pull up with PeopleSoft and I say, yeah, I need to confirm your date of birth, I need to confirm your address, can we confirm this, can we confirm that? It's fine to do that. As I said, there's no perfect world, but we do what we can. Other questions? Okay.
Thank you so
Take
much.
cookies, I guess.
Yeah.